It is really good to see your faces this morning. I'm not entirely certain how to start. We had planned to celebrate the feast day of St. Francis with an outdoor worship and a blessing of the animals. But given all that has happened in the wake of Helene's arrival last week, it seemed important to have the space to come together in our sanctuary, this upside-down ark we come to week after week as a place to be held by God momentarily, lifted up and nourished to go back into the chaotic sea of life around us. This past week and couple days has been harrowing. Our own experiences, together with the images and videos coming out of our neighboring towns and communities, paint a bleak picture of the destruction and devastation from Helene. And my brain is still not quite sure how to handle it. Perhaps you feel the same. Perhaps you find your mind racing, thinking of all the things that need to be done, people who need to be helped, the cleaning, the rescuing, the feeding, the list goes on. Perhaps you feel overwhelmed and paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the work ahead and the trauma experienced. Perhaps you are still trying to hear from loved ones to know they are okay. And perhaps you are exhausted and don't have any thoughts left to have. Not to mention the emotional seesaw during this time. From breaking into tears randomly throughout the day, to anger, to gratitude, to numbness. There's a lot stirring in us. And we are all in different spaces within these spectra. I keep finding myself in the tension of knowing that I am okay and simultaneously aware that we are not okay. And in the midst of all this, we hear the words from our gospel passage from Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing." Jesus is not suggesting that food and clothing are not necessary, which would feel especially callous given that there are those currently desperate for food to eat, safe water to drink, and clothes to wear. Rather, he is reminding us that God knows our needs and desires them to be met. After all, Jesus says, God feeds the ravens and clothes the lilies, and they are no more valuable than we. So do not keep striving for what you are to eat and what you are to drink, and do not keep worrying. For it is the nations of the world that strive after all these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, strive for God's kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. And I think we have also witnessed that this week. We heard it in our moments closest to Christ. Because despite all the terror and horror of what happened, I have cried more over the acts of kindness and love that have taken place and in the signs of resilience we have shown. In the sharing of homes, showers, meals, and generators. In neighbors and strangers coming together to clear tree branches and trees from roads and off houses, stack wood, repair fences, rebuild driveways, and dig trenches and bolster creek beds to redirect the water back in the right channels. In driving and hiking around countless washed out roads and driveways to do wellness checks and evacuate stranded people, check in on each other, to visit and give each other hugs. In the flower that somehow stayed put once the waters receded. In the family of deer showing up in our churchyard. And as I was stuck at home, I learned later of my campus ministry students digging out parking lots, packing up what was salvageable from a dear community member's destroyed apartment, helping her move, volunteering all over the county to provide water and food to people who need it, and offering Compline services when my co-campus minister Stephanie and I couldn't make it out to them. God's kingdom, the beloved community, is what we have been witnessing and creating this past week in the face of tragedy. And that is what we must continue to strive for. But we also need to pace ourselves. There is a long journey ahead of us as we move from rescue to recovery and rebuilding. Remember to take time to rest as well as work. Share your stories with each other. Have grace with each other when we find our emotions out of whack from the overwhelm. And keep coming back to this ark and to this table for nourishment, rest, and rejuvenation. Because it is at this table that we learn the posture that we then take out into the world, preparing us to be the body of Christ and to walk in love. Here we stand or kneel with hands outstretched, dependent upon God's grace, and realize that we do not and cannot live in isolation, but only ever together. We know now more than ever that we need each other. And it is in remembering the body of Christ that we can then go out to be the helpers and servants that bring about God's kingdom. As we receive the Eucharist today, we honor those who are not yet able to come to the table here or in their own sacred spaces. And we also honor those who now join us at the table in the communion of saints. I think God is crying with us. And as our tears meet God's, may they become healing waters that shape into the springs in the valleys flowing between the mountains, as our psalm states. As we go forth, remember what Luke's gospel tells us. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. May we make it so.